The US government has decided to slash its contribution to the United Nations budget for the coming year. Ambassador Nikki Haley gave a statement explaining the move.
When we make generous contributions to the UN, we also have a legitimate expectation that our goodwill is recognized and respected. The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations.
Nikki Haley went on to accuse the United Nations of inefficiency and overspending. Washington's contribution will be reduced by $285 million over the next fiscal year. Well, we're going to cross live now to political scientist Kaveh Afrasiabi, author of UN Management Reform. Thanks for coming onto the programme, Kaveh. Let's start with the UN vote, 128-9 against Trump's decision on Jerusalem. In your opinion, do you think this is a direct retaliation from Washington?
Well, based on the statement read by Ambassador Haley, there is no doubt that there is a direct connection between that vote, which was a total embarrassment to the United States, and the retaliation that has followed in the form of a big financial stab at the UN, regretted by all the UN high officials, some of whom I've spoken to. And there was a fear that this could be twice as bad, and on the bright side, it's not even close to what candidate Trump promised in terms of a 50% slash in the U.S.'s contribution to the UN. Nevertheless, I suppose the White House's perverse Christmas gift to the world community and the premier world organization that saves millions of lives and is responsible for global peace and security, and definitely a big step in the wrong direction, contrary to what Ambassador Haley said.
Yeah, I mean, the explanation that she's given is that it's down to inefficiency and overspending of the United Nations, which she says is a well-known fact. And she goes on to say, we will no longer let the generosity of the American people be taken advantage of or remain unchecked. How right is she about the accusations of inefficiency and overspending?
Well, you know, the UN has been grappling with the issue of reform, and I've written extensively about that for a long time. But this is the wrong way of approaching the problem and connecting it to a particular vote at the UN General Assembly and so forth. I think just about everything that Ambassador Haley has done since assuming her post has been contrary to the spirit of the UN Charter, has been quite undiplomatic, foreign to the very notion of world diplomacy, complete tactfulness, and without any sense of nuance. So this kind of crude language of threat and punishment used against sovereign nations and so forth, this really hurts the US's image and credibility worldwide, and the United States is not helping itself by having someone represented at the United Nations who is so undiplomatic and foreign to the spirit of the United Nations.
Yeah. Some would say that it's been a tit-for-tat kind of reaction. Now, if we look at the US and their payments to the UN in the past, in 2015, for example, the US owed $2 billion for peacekeeping efforts, according to the UN Budget Office, that is. Do you think Washington is exaggerating its so-called generosity to the UN if we look at that one figure?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the UN's contribution to the city of New York itself, it far outweighs what the US gives to the UN. And the US, takes a lot more from the UN than the other way around. And a lot of people tend to ignore that. I doubt very much that Mr. Trump himself would be the US president if the UN headquarters was not in this city. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that you have an administration that uses what the philosopher Jürgen Habermas refers to as instrumentalist rationality, that, you know, is simply an archaic 19th century method of dealing with world diplomacy. Is this arcane approach is bound to, you know, have negative repercussions on world peace and security. And if you take money from the UN and starve it financially, that means that the UN will be able to do a lot less in terms of refugees, population management, sustainable development, conflict prevention, peace building, peacekeeping, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, Ambassador Haley is just the wrong person, you know, at the wrong time, and is doing whatever it can to continue this Trump's war on the United Nations.
Kaveh, I mean, you've just listed all the things that the UN is supposed to do and does, but isn't that Haley's point, is the fact that she's saying that the US people have been taken advantage of because of the contribution to the UN?
No, because the very purpose of contributing to the United Nations is not to, you know, use it as a self-platform to bully and threaten other nations and to extract unidirectional benefits from it, but rather to engage in global diplomacy for the resolution of global conflicts and issues such as the problems of sustainable development and so on. And for Ambassador Haley to claim that there's got to be a, you know, monetary value on these kinds of reciprocal services is just misreading the very notion, intention, and purpose of the United Nations and membership in it. And unfortunately, the very ABC of UN culture of peace and reciprocity, tolerance, and dialogue is missing in the mindset and worldview of Nikki Haley.
Okay, well, we could discuss this for ages, but we've run out of time. Kaveh Afrasiabi, political scientist and author of UN Management Reform. Thanks very much for coming onto the programme.